So we're going to shift gears to a different domain, which is, given all the things that people have heard all afternoon, what are the challenges this poses for the training of our future healthcare professionals and physicians? And I want to sort of change the title of the symposium for my at least 10 minutes to the responsible use of technologies in education, because we face the same challenges in terms of the number of technologies that have come on the scene, the demand from students and residents to incorporate technologies into our curriculum, what has been shown to be useful, what has been helpful in improving learning, what just is a fancy toy, and how do we sort of deal with the rapid pace at which these technologies are moving. They have profound implications for universities. Universities are, as you know, very large, non-nimble systems that require a lot of time to change curricula. The healthcare system, on the other hand, is a very rapidly changing system that needs to be very nimble and adaptive. And how do we marry the two systems, the training system for health professionals and where they're going to be practicing? What happened?
We're having a bit of a glitch projector. Wait 15 seconds.
Okay. Can I take this off of you? Yes. So, what the context I wanted to set to begin with is a project that many of you may have heard of, that I've had the privilege of being involved with over the past couple of years, called the Future of Medical Education in Canada project of the Faculties of Medicine of Canada. And this has gone on for the last 2 years. And really with a very, very broad sort of consultation process and research and interviews and blue ribbon panels and young leaders forums and international consultations and so forth to come up with some recommendations about where we should be heading in medical education. The undergraduate phase has just been completed. The postgraduate phase has now been funded by Health Canada as well. And after that, there'll be a phase on continuing education and professional development. And what you see there, just very briefly, are the 10 major recommendations that have emerged from this project. I'm going to briefly go through them to set the context then, and then specifically focus on technology, which came up as a huge issue within the project discussions. So the first recommendation, very briefly, is around social responsibility, social accountability. Faculties of medicine have this responsibility, individual physicians do. We must address individual, community, local, national, international needs. Number 2 recommendation talks about who do we take into the health professions? Who is coming into medicine? Are we selecting the right kind of people? Diversity issues come into play there. Number 3 had to do with the scientific basis of medicine. Are we teaching our current students the kinds of skills they're going to need in terms of scientific thinking for the future? The 4th, around prevention and public health, a major, major theme around the world that physicians have to be far more competent in that area. The hidden curriculum, I think we've heard some examples of that already this afternoon. One example I relate actually to technology. We heard from Kaveh about the Tasman hospitals not getting together on electronic medical records. Where we hear this as educators is when students and residents say they can't even get, when they're working at one hospital, an email about a patient at another hospital. We can't even get a basic email system integrated across different institutions, which has major potential implications for patient safety. The learning context, where is our learning taking place? Huge implications for technology, because learning in medical education is no longer confined to major hospitals and tertiary and quaternary centers. Every community hospital now in Ontario is a teaching hospital. A lot of our education takes place out in rural communities, smaller community hospitals, and how are these all linked? Generalism was one of the recommendations for MD education, valuing the general comprehensive approach of family medicine, general internists, general psychiatrists, and so forth. Number 9, a competency-based approach. This is talking about linking really the whole spectrum of medical education, undergrad, postgrad, and continuing education, and looking at students' evolving set of competencies. Looking at our whole system, does it make sense that we have all these silos? Does it make sense when we award the MD degree that medical training is 4 years, that the residency match occurs when it does, that accreditation standards are different in undergrad and postgrad, and all those things now are being looked at a very transformative level, both nationally and provincially. So to enable some of those recommendations to be implemented, the steering committee, of which I was a member, and virtually everyone we consulted with said, you've got to think about technology. Technology is going to be a key enabler here, as well as a number of other issues that you see up on the screen. So the technology recommendation said that based on rapid and evolving technological changes related to the way people communicate and learn, there must be increased understanding and use of technology on the part of both faculty and learners at all MD education sites. That was the actual recommendation. But in the prose of the project, we put in this statement. We said that the education system, or in this case, the medical education system, must ensure that key competencies are attained by every physician while simultaneously providing a variety of learning paths and technologies that prepare students for diverse roles in their future careers. And the key words there that I've sort of pulled out of the paragraph are nimble, adaptable, flexible, supportive. And technology can help with all those things, or can hinder. The medical education system also has to strive to keep pace with advances in information technology and utilize those technologies where beneficial to learning and practice. So we've heard some good examples this afternoon where there's great technologies, but not a lot of evidence that they're actually helpful in practice. It's the same thing in education. So what are some of the technologies now that exist in medical schools? What I want to sort of show you what's going on and then have hopefully a little bit of dialogue in the panel around their usefulness. So one is simulations. So simulations have come very big on the scene, and all different kinds of simulations, whether they're human simulations, use of standardized and simulated patients, team simulations to teach collaborative, patient-centered care, simulations obviously for technical procedures and skills, and then some of the simulations around actual decision-making and critical thinking, problem-solving skills. These are widely used now in education, and there are some obvious advantages to them in terms of being able to practice in a safe environment and get feedback and so forth. But equally, we hear feedback from learners that there's an overuse of simulations in the educational environment, and that what they really need to understand is the real environment that they're going to be practicing in, and how do we sort of marry the two together, and what is the evidence that what you've learned in the simulation generalizes to the same situation in real life, and there's conflicting evidence there. Video conferencing technology. So this whole distance education movement, and in fact the whole information age in the world, is saying that communication now, it doesn't matter that I'm close to you. That you can do the communication across the world, across the province, across the country, that this is equivalent to a face-to-face communication. So you have all these medical campuses that have sprung up across North America that are distributed, that rely completely on video conferencing, video linking technology, and the assumption is this is the same as face-to-face learning. Again, not a lot of studies to actually say that's true. A lot of anecdotal feedback from learners to say what they value most is the face-to-face contact with faculty. That's the single most important commodity in medical education. And that if the video technology is sufficiently sophisticated, real-time, supported, and so forth, after a period of time, people begin to lose that sense that you are video conferencing, and it does become as close a mentoring relationship. But it's not easy, and there's not a lot of documentation yet or studies about that, despite the fact that we're relying on this extensively. I actually invited yesterday to our medical curriculum committee a fellow at U of T by the name of Gage Averill, who I'm working with now at University of Toronto, Mississauga. He's the dean there on our Mississauga campus that we're developing, but he happened to be the former dean of music. And what I asked him to come to the curriculum committee was not about the Mississauga campus, but to talk about how music education is changing and the influence, again, of distance learning in music education, because there's a lot we can learn from that, and the implications for programs. Because what's happening with now the ability to create music simultaneously across huge distances. So students are forming, ensemble groups where the trumpet player is in England and the guitar player is in New York, and they can play together and create music. And what are the implications then for saying, well, we have a music program at U of T, And so when I look at our medical program, the same thing's happening, right? So across the world, we heard in this project that what students want and how things are evolving in higher education is all open source curriculum. The curriculum is, unlike the IP issues we're talking about with products and drugs and technical products, the curriculum, the educational materials, the expectation of learners today is that these are open and available and can be cross-referenced back and forth across universities. And as you know, there's some universities now that do this extensively. MIT, I think, was one of the first that developed this, and the number of people who take courses there is incredible. What we hear then is that in Canada, we should be sharing all the curricula. If we've developed a neat simulation at U of T, people in BC should be able to use that the next day, basically. And any attempt that schools engage in to password protect or restrict use, students will find a workaround around that anyway. So again, it really sort of changes the way you think about the sort of autonomy of the university, or sort of what is the U of T medical program versus the NOSM, Northern Ontario School program versus the UBC program. As you saw in the first slide, I said this collective vision becomes a reality for medical education in the country. I wanted to show you, so here's what, so a few years ago, we had lectures, right? And lectures are, it's just, they were delivered like we're doing now, and unless it's being taped or broadcast in some way, it's gone. Students said, well, this is not acceptable in the modern age. We want them all taped so we can go and look at them at midnight or 2 in the morning or so forth. So I'll just show you very quickly what we do now. But then I'm going to comment. We cannot open this. Are we connected to the internet?
Connect the internet the file.
All right, I'll see if I can come back to that. What that was going to show is simply the fact that now all our lectures, every single one, is both captured the slides and the audio together. And we thought there'd be initially some pushback from faculty who are worried about their property or where it's going on the internet and so forth. The reality is everyone has accepted this fully. The debate yesterday at our curriculum committee was, is there a role for lectures at all within the curriculum? In fact, what is the evolving role of this type of forum in universities generally? And sort of the predominant view is that when it's like this kind of symposium, when there's interaction, when there's discussion, when there's dialogue created, that's fine. That's a good use of this kind of setting. But if it's just a receipt of material, there's millions of ways all of us can acquire knowledge, just pure knowledge. And the actual face-to-face time should be something very different. So I don't know what will happen with lectures at universities. We're engaged in that right now. Here's a very neat tool where I would say technology has been exceptionally helpful in medical education. So all of us were educated in medical schools where really no one really knew what went on during a clerkship or residency. You didn't know what patients were seen, you didn't know how often they were seen, you didn't know whether you were observed, you had no way of knowing whether a resident who saw a patient with diabetes in year 1, at the beginning of the year, and then at the end of the year was treating the patient any differently, better, had seen the correct kind of management and so forth.
Sorry, just 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is actually the last slide. One of the things that in fact the accrediting bodies have sort of forced upon schools is to say, you've got to know what you're teaching. You've got to create a map. So here's a little online video I'm going to show you. It's a very short clip. Oops. Let's see. Try the online version. See what comes up.
Control and click.
Control what?
Control and click.
On this one?
Yeah.
Thank you. So look carefully at the email there. Did you have the sound of it?
Sound?
No, don't worry about it. But anyway, so this faculty member has to put together a lecture on alcoholism. So they go to our curriculum map website, which is now up and operating, and they search our curriculum. Search activities by selected parameters or by database. They look at it, put in a word. Search, and immediately everywhere in the curriculum, in any topic, even remotely related to alcoholism, comes up. And you can determine from there whether it's the main focus of the talk, the seminar, the lecture, the lab, it's a secondary focus, or it's just an incidental discussion of maybe liver disease. So that as you're teaching, you can take advantage of technology to do a better job. So hopefully, we won't hear from students in the future, well, we already did this last year, didn't you know we got a lecture before on that? Or somebody covered the same material, in pediatrics, and now I'm learning it again in family medicine. They can actually adapt it, so they know what's come before, so this lecture can cover something different, maybe more sophisticated, build on things. So how do I stop this? I'll just close it. Okay. Finally, my last comment is we heard about all the social networking and the IT stuff, the Facebook and the blogs and the Twitters. So this came to me very starkly a few years ago. I don't remember what year exactly Facebook came out. Does anyone remember what year that was? 2004. So about a year later, that was the first year. A year later, when we were admitting our medical students, it came to our attention that within 3 hours of the offers of admission all going out on the same day in Ontario, May 15th, that Facebook groups had formed. So when you think of the implications of that, in the old days, students would come to medical school several months later, wouldn't know each other, hadn't formed groups, hadn't formed networks maybe of people with common interests and ideas. Maybe they formed a group now that were coming to U of T because they wanted to do global health and they found other like-minded people, and actually that's why they chose to come to U of T. All because of the dialogue on Facebook that occurred instantly. These groups being set up after offers of admission would go out. So now our admissions office, has a blog. It has it does the Twitter. It does everything. This is the very last aspect, which is something we're going to be bringing in again, really for the benefit of the students to be able to track their own education, both from undergrad right through postgrad and beyond. A practice portfolio where they can reflect on the patients they've seen, the numbers of patients they've seen, patients with what types of diseases. In its sort of earlier iteration, some students here may remember something called e-log, which was sort of just more a very sort of paper-based, non-useful thing for students. Now with technology again, we can create portfolio systems that actually will help the students with their education, with their development of competencies. And these are just some screenshots of a practice portfolio that we're bringing in. So thank you very much.